Afternoon. What are you doing out here?
Stand on the sidewalk. Heading inside in a minute.
Inside where? You live around here?
I do. That house right behind me.
You sure about that? Folks on this street don't usually look like
I'm
you.
sure. Bought it 3 years ago. Got the paperwork if you need it.
Might have to see some ID.
Happy to show you, but I'm not going anywhere.
Late afternoon light sat low over the street, turning the tops of the trees gold and throwing long shadows across the sidewalks. It was the kind of neighborhood where everything looked intentional. Fresh mulch in the flower beds, trimmed hedges, quiet driveways, and the soft hum of sprinklers ticking somewhere behind closed fences. The air had that calm, end-of-day stillness where most people were either inside, winding down, or pulling into their garages for dinner. Marcus Turner was outside for the simplest reason in the world. He was standing on the sidewalk, keys in one hand, phone in the other, suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened just enough to breathe. He looked like a man who'd had a long workday and was finally back where he belonged. His luxury SUV was parked nearby, clean and understated in the way expensive cars often are when the owner doesn't need to prove anything. Marcus glanced toward his front door. His house was right behind him, and took a slow breath, like he was about to head inside and let the day drop off his shoulders. That's when the patrol car rolled up. Not fast, not with lights. Just a slow crawl to the curb, the kind that makes you notice it without fully understanding why it's stopping. The engine idled, a door opened, and then a voice cut into the quiet like it had permission. "What are you doing out here?" Marcus turned his head slightly. He didn't flinch. He didn't tense up. He simply looked at the officer the way a professional looks at an interruption. Calm, attentive, and already measuring whether the interaction was going to stay normal. "Standing on the sidewalk," Marcus said, steady. "Heading inside in a minute." The officer didn't take that answer the way a normal person would. His tone didn't soften. His posture didn't relax. Instead, he leaned into it, as if Marcus had just admitted something suspicious. "Inside where?" the officer asked. "You live around here." "I do," Marcus said, nodding once. "That house right behind me." The officer's eyes flicked over his shoulder toward the home, then back to Marcus, with a look that wasn't curiosity. It was disbelief, like the house didn't match the man standing in front of it. "Uh-huh," the officer muttered. "You sure about that?" Marcus kept his face neutral. "Yes." The officer took one step closer and lowered his voice like he was sharing a fact he expected Marcus to accept. "Folks on this street don't usually look like you." It landed exactly the way it sounded. An accusation disguised as an observation. The kind of sentence that tells you the officer isn't investigating anything you did. He's investigating whether you're allowed to exist where you are. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't snap back. He'd been trained too well for that. He simply nodded toward the SUV. "Bought it 3 years ago," he said. "Got the paperwork if you need it." He, officer's eyes tracked to the vehicle and back again, as if the car itself was evidence. Then he reached for the next step that men like him always reach for when they can't justify their suspicion: identification. "Might have to see some ID," he said. "Happy to show you," Marcus replied, "but I'm not going anywhere." That sentence was calm, but it was a boundary. Polite compliance without surrender. And on a body cam recording, it would later sound like exactly what it was. A man asserting his rights without escalating. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe. Stories like this only matter when people actually see them, and tomorrow's one is the kind you don't want to miss. The officer's name was Daniel Reynolds, 38 years old, and he wasn't new at this. He'd developed a reputation inside the department that people quietly acknowledged, but nobody fully confronted. He was known for stopping people who didn't fit the neighborhood, and somehow those stops always targeted the same kind of resident. He'd been warned twice about profiling. Nothing severe enough to end his career, Just warnings, notes, reminders. Paper shields that protected him from accountability while doing nothing to change his habits. Reynolds believed confidence meant guilt. He believed calmness was performance, and in his mind, anyone who looked too professional was trying too hard to appear legitimate. So when he saw a black man in a suit on a residential street like this, he didn't think homeowner. He didn't think professional. He didn't think resident coming home from work. He thought wrong place. And because he wore a badge, he treated that thought like probable cause. Reynolds stepped closer, voice sharpening. "Where's your ID? Let me see it." Marcus Turner was 42. Calm voice, steady posture. The kind of presence that made you assume he worked in something serious. Someone used to high standards and controlled environments. He didn't get nervous. He didn't rush. He didn't start explaining his life story because a stranger demanded it. "I live here," he said. Reynolds dismissed it immediately, like it wasn't even worth considering. "ID. Now." Marcus reached for his wallet slowly. Trained movements, controlled, intentional, not nervous, precise. It was the same kind of movement instructors teach recruits. Don't make sudden motions, keep your hands visible, and don't give an officer an excuse to claim you reached aggressively. He handed the ID over without extra words and without announcing who he was. He didn't start with, "I'm an FBI instructor," because he didn't need to. His training wasn't to name drop. His training was to stay calm and let the system confirm what was true. Reynolds held the ID like he'd already decided it was fake. He barely scanned the name before shaking his head. "Federal instructor?" he said with a scoff. "Really? That's the story today?" "It's real," Marcus replied. Reynolds laughed under his breath. "You expect me to believe you train federal agents?" Marcus didn't argue. He didn't match the tone. He just watched Reynolds the way someone watches a predictable mistake unfold. Because Marcus had taught officers younger than Reynolds how bias distorts judgment. He had taught them how quickly a situation turns dangerous when an officer decides someone is suspicious before the stop even begins. And now he was watching that exact lesson play out in real time. Reynolds stepped closer, irritated by Marcus's calmness. "Hands where I can see them." "They're visible," Marcus said. "Higher." Marcus raised them slightly. Not out of fear, out of control. Compliance without surrender. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Reynolds muttered. "I'm cooperating," Marcus answered. Reynolds didn't like how steady that sounded. He didn't like that Marcus wasn't begging to be believed. So he did what insecure authority always does when it feels itself losing control. He looked for reinforcements. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch," Reynolds said. "I've got a subject with possible false identification. Running it now." Marcus stayed still. He wasn't shocked. Not by the call, not by the accusation, not by the tone. He'd trained hundreds of recruits on this exact sequence. Officer sees a person he doesn't expect, decides they must be fake, then escalates the situation so the narrative becomes harder to challenge. Reynolds stared at Marcus up and down. "People don't walk around here in suits," he said. Marcus looked at him evenly. "People don't walk around here in suits? Or people like me don't?" Reynolds paused. Half a second, just long enough to reveal the truth. He didn't answer directly. He muttered, "You know what I mean." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't have to. The bias was already on camera. Reynolds tightened his grip on the ID like he could squeeze a confession out of plastic. "If this comes back fake," he said, "we're going to have a real problem." Marcus's eyes didn't leave his face. Calm, controlled. "Check it," Marcus replied. The radio was seconds away from responding. Reynolds waited, still convinced the ID wouldn't match the man standing in front of him. And Marcus, patient, trained, and fully authorized to be exactly where he was, waited with complete composure. Because unlike Reynolds, Marcus understood something fundamental. The real problem wasn't the ID, it was the officer holding it. Reynolds leaned slightly toward the body cam, jaw tight, flashlight in his hand like it was a weapon instead of a tool. The tension sharpened into something heavier, the kind of moment where a stop stops being routine and becomes personal. And in that silence, Marcus decided to speak again. Not louder, not angrier, just clearer. "Officer," Marcus said, "I've already given you my ID. You can run it. You can verify everything." Reynolds stared at him and started tapping the side of the cruiser with his finger. Fast, impatient, like he needed something physical to keep himself from losing control. People in that neighborhood knew that tapping. It wasn't a habit, it was a warning sign. "You think I'm stupid?" Reynolds snapped. "People fake IDs every day, and a suit, a luxury SUV out here. You expect me to believe this is all normal?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "I live here. You're standing in front of my house." The body cam caught it, the officer glancing backward at the home just behind him, as if seeing it for the first time in a way he didn't want to admit. He didn't like being corrected, and even with the truth right there, he still wasn't ready to accept it. "You know what?" Reynolds said, voice rising. "Step out of the car. We're going to sort this the right way." Marcus didn't move immediately, not out of defiance, but out of disappointment. He knew de-escalation. He knew federal protocol. He knew exactly what Reynolds was supposed to do and what he was supposed to avoid. Instead, Reynolds was doing everything wrong. Marcus finally unbuckled and stepped out. The body cam showed the suit clearly. Clean, professional, not flashy. He wasn't dressed to impress anyone. He looked like a man who came home from work and wanted to be left alone. Reynolds circled him like he was searching for trouble that didn't exist. "So tell me," Reynolds said, "where exactly do you work? And don't lie." "Quantico," Marcus replied. Reynolds squinted. "Quantico? Really? That's the best lie you got?" "It's not a lie." "Ah, right," Reynolds scoffed. "You're some big-shot agent flying around stopping terrorism, living in the suburbs. Give me a break." Marcus looked him in the eye. Not with anger, but with calm confidence that somehow made Reynolds even more irritated. "I didn't say I was an agent," Marcus said. "I said I work in Quantico. There's a difference." Reynolds smirked, thinking he'd caught him. "Oh, so you're switching the story now, trying to clean it up." Marcus shook his head once. "No, I'm being precise." Reynolds leaned in. "And what exactly do you teach at Quantico, since you're so precise?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Federal use of force protocols, tactical judgment, bias recognition." That last part hit Reynolds harder than he expected. The camera caught it, the first real flicker of doubt, the smallest crack in the certainty he'd been leaning on. But instead of stepping back, he dug in. "Anybody can say that," he muttered. "Words don't mean anything. I'll believe the system. The system always catches the liars." Marcus didn't respond. His silence bothered Reynolds more than any argument could. Reynolds walked back to his patrol car to run the ID. He took longer than usual, not because the system was slow, but because the truth appearing on the screen made his stomach drop. Federal clearance, agency email, employment classification, official verification. Everything matched. The body cam caught Reynolds rubbing his forehead with his palm. One full second of frustration as reality punched straight through the assumptions he'd spent the last several minutes building. When he walked back toward Marcus, the confidence was gone, but the arrogance was still fighting to stay alive. "So," Reynolds said stiffly, "it looks like your story checks out." Marcus didn't smirk. He didn't celebrate. That wasn't who he was. He asked the only question that mattered. "Are we done?" Reynolds' jaw tightened again. Not quite. I still need to ask why you reacted the way you did when I pulled you over. Marcus blinked once, more disbelief than surprise. You approached me yelling, Marcus said. You told me I didn't belong in my own neighborhood. You demanded identification before telling me why I was even being questioned. That's why I stayed calm, because escalating would have made this worse for both of us. Reynolds had no response. He stared at the ground and mumbled something about routine checks. Marcus didn't let it slide. Not aggressively, just clearly. Officer, he said, this wasn't routine, and you know it. 3 seconds of silence. Then Reynolds clicked his pen closed like it was the end of a conversation he didn't want on record. You can go. Marcus nodded once, got back into his SUV, buckled his seatbelt, started the engine, and pulled into his own driveway, barely 15 feet from where he'd been questioned. The body cam captured it perfectly. The truth wasn't just proven, it was undeniable. Reynolds stood in the street watching him, and the camera caught the look on his face, an officer realizing the man he tried to embarrass had seen straight through him from start to finish. Marcus didn't slam his door. He didn't glare back. He simply walked inside, leaving Reynolds alone with the truth he didn't want to face. But it didn't end cleanly. Because Reynolds, embarrassed and exposed, still tried to salvage control. He demanded a second ID. He asked for proof of residence. He snapped, "Why would someone like you even live here?" And the ugliness of it came through in every word. Every question was disbelief. Every tone was bias. Marcus stayed composed. "I've already given you everything you need," he said. "I expect you to follow procedure, not assumptions." Reynolds tried to improvise a justification. "Someone called about suspicious activity," he muttered. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "Provide the call reference." Reynolds faltered, glancing around like he was searching for witnesses he could intimidate into validating his story. Instead, witnesses found him. A neighbor stepped onto the sidewalk, an older woman carrying groceries. She paused, looked at the scene, and asked, "Is everything okay?" Then she said the sentence that erased Reynolds' last excuse. "He lives right there. He's been here for years." 2 more neighbors emerged from their driveways, casually observing, confirming Marcus' presence without hesitation. The suspicious activity narrative evaporated in real time. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply stated the truth for the record. "This stop has no legal basis. I'm fully cooperating and I expect professionalism." Reynolds tried one last weak line. "We're just doing our job." Marcus ignored it. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out his phone, and put a call on speaker to his direct supervisor. The camera captured Reynolds' eyes widening. The sudden realization that Marcus wasn't just calm. He was connected to accountability. "You didn't call anyone," Marcus said softly, firmly. "You're trying to save face." Reynolds had nothing left. Marcus spoke clearly, methodically, like someone summarizing an incident report. "You stopped me without cause. You questioned my legitimacy based on appearance. You escalated unnecessarily. This is harassment, and it will be reported. This entire encounter is being recorded." Reynolds stood frozen. His authority drained out of him in front of neighbors, in front of the camera, in front of a man who refused to give him the emotional reaction he wanted. Finally, Reynolds muttered, "You're free to go." Marcus nodded and walked toward his home, composed, confident, fully aware that every step was part of a record now. The street returned to quiet. Neighbors drifted back inside. Marcus closed his front door, and Reynolds remained standing in the sunlit street with a body cam full of evidence. Because the moment wasn't dramatic in the way people expect. No shouting match, no physical fight, no heroic one-liners. Just a professional man standing firm against bias, and an officer unraveling under the weight of his own assumptions. The footage ended with the timestamp still visible, the afternoon continuing like nothing happened. But the meaning of what happened didn't fade with the sunlight. It stayed in the recording, in the neighbor's confirmation, and in the simple fact that Marcus Turner didn't need to prove he belonged. He only needed to stay calm long enough for the truth to corner the lie. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated fairly, no matter what they look like or where they live, hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe, because the next story shows exactly why accountability matters when nobody thinks the camera is watching.